All right. So I just want to welcome everybody today. Thank you so much for joining us for our very first Funding and Governance Workgroup meeting. Today, we're going to spend a little bit of time and give you a brief overview of the project and where we are to date. And then we're going to talk a lot about transitioning the MOU that we have into an interlocal agreement. I really appreciate all the one-on-ones that we had with each of you, and it's great to convene all of you today. Dave is going to walk us through with our team some of the important components of the ILA. And again, I think you guys saw my note. We weren't intending folks to do a fine tooth comb through it. We're going to review those and give you in your legal more time to review that. There were a lot of questions that came up about membership to this group, the primary, alternate, and I think a lot of folks were using different nomenclature, which is why I came up with that spreadsheet. And if folks have changes to that, that was to help spark some of the conversation of who are the right folks to be included for this meeting. So definitely I've heard from several of you, but we're just trying to get the right mix of folks here at this meeting to kind of have that singular voice from the body as we move towards decision. It's challenging if we have a lot of folks from each jurisdiction that want to listen in, but have a lot of voices. It'll make it really challenging to move quickly through this. So this is a series of meetings, and like I said, we're going to be getting to the interlocal agreement. Our hope is to get this at the end of the year. I want to just go ahead and introduce our team and myself. So Project Director Ann Larson with Department of Enterprise Services, and I'm overseeing the Estuary Restoration Project. And Tessa, I'll kick it over to you, and then we'll introduce your team, and then we can go back to our other folks as part of the Funding and Governance Workgroup. That sounds good.
Sounds good. Hi, everyone. My name is Tessa Gardner-Brown. I'm a principal at Floyd Snyder. I think I've had the opportunity to work with most of you. It's nice to see you all again. I'm excited to be continuing in this work, and the team that we have today is also continuing from the work that we did together in the MOU. So there's good strength in the continuity and the institutional knowledge on our side. I serve as the consultant team project manager and was in that role for the EIS as well. I work very closely with Sarah.
Yeah, hi everyone, Sarah Rich from Echo Northwest, and I'm serving as the funding strategy lead for this project, as well as engaging with this group. Lorelei?
Hi, everybody. Great to see so many of you that I've had the opportunity to work with in the past. I'm Lorelei Jensen with Echo Northwest. Sarah and I have been working pretty tightly together on the funding piece of the puzzle for quite some time, and I'm excited to continue the conversation.
Let's go to Erin next.
Hi, I'm Erin Murray. I'm with Floyd Snyder. I'm the environmental lead for the project, and that effort has not kicked off yet. So I'm helping the Funding and Governance Workgroup. Nice to see you all.
And then very, very importantly, Dave Merchant.
Thanks, Tessa. Dave Merchant, Assistant Attorney General. I was on the project during the MOU stage and am continuing on as well. Happy to be here. I'll kick that back to Tessa or Ann to move on.
Awesome.
Go ahead, Ann.
So I'm going to go ahead and ask the jurisdictions then to introduce themselves. And like I said, tell us who their primary is and their secondary. Also, if there are questions about what those roles are, happy to take those right now. And again, we want to hear from all of you, but we want to do that with a singular voice, which is why we had a primary and a secondary, just to make sure we had representation from the jurisdiction. So and if you could, during your introduction, tell us what your role is. So I'm going to go ahead and just start with the City of Olympia. Whoever wants to get started and kick us off.
Hi, I'm Danny Madrone. I'm on the Olympia City Council. I'm actually the alternate for this work, but Jim Cooper was unable to make it today. Do you want me to introduce staff or have them introduce themselves? How would you like to do this?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. Jay and Rich, why don't you go ahead and just introduce yourselves?
I'm Jay Burney, Olympia City Manager, and I am the primary staff contact for Olympia.
And I'm Rich Hoy, Assistant City Manager for Olympia, and I'm Jay's alternate.
Awesome. And I can't see all your faces, so I'm going to just go down my list in alphabetical. So Tumwater.
This is Debbie Sullivan, Mayor of Tumwater. I am the primary elected, and I will then add Lisa.
Good afternoon. It looks like my video is not working properly. I'm Lisa Parks, the city administrator for Tumwater, and I'm the primary staff contact. And then I will send it over to Councilmember Michael Althauser.
Thanks. Michael Althauser, Tumwater City Council. I'm the secondary.
Awesome. Thank you both. And my colleague, Ashley from DES.
Hi, my name is Ashley Howard. I'm the Chief Financial Officer at the Department of Enterprise Services. I am the primary when it comes to the financial related component at DES. Obviously, Anne is primary for the project.
Thanks for that. And then Department of Natural Resources. I can't see who we've got here.
Hi, it's Katie Taylor. I'm the Chief Operating Officer, and I actually am secondary, but Tom Gorman is off today, so I am here. And Katie Allen, who is our, can introduce herself, and she'll be added as the alternate. So Katie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Katie. Hello, everyone. I'm Katie Allen. I'm the Acting Deputy Supervisor for our Forest Resilience, Regulation, and Aquatic Resources divisions here at DNR, and I will be serving as the alternate to back up Tom Gorman, who's our Division Manager for Aquatic Resources. So nice to meet everyone.
Yeah, thank you. And then we've got Lot.
I'll jump in.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt.
Yeah. Matt Kennelly, Executive Director here at LOD. I'm the primary staff contact. And Pedro Lieto, who's our primary elected, if you wanted to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Matt Kennelly, primary staff. My name is Leah Doloff, and I'm the primary elected. I serve our community on Tumwater City Council and represent LOD Board of Directors.
And we also have Justin Long here with us.
Yeah, I'm Justin Long. I'm the Finance and Administrative Director at LOD.
I'm glad we got you in here, Justin. Thank you.
Thanks.
And then the Port of Olympia, please. Jasmine, I think I saw you here.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Jasmine Vasavida. I'm a recent addition to the Port of Olympia's commission. So I'm here as the elected, and the alternate will be, I think, Maggie McCarty Sanders. And we have staff who's on camera, Jonathan Wolf.
Yep, I'm Jonathan Wolf, Port of Olympia. I'm the Bud Inlet Project Manager, and I'm the alternate staff representative.
Wonderful. Squaxin Island's next on my list.
Good afternoon, Ray Peters, Squaxin Island Tribe. I am the primary staff person, and I'm not sure Scott Stelzner is on the line, but I work at Squaxin and been around for a while. Yeah.
Thanks, Ray. I don't know if Scott is here.
I am online.
Oh,
yep. So Natural Resources Department, fisheries biologist, and at least for now, I'm the secondary. And in case other people have not heard, Jeff Dickinson, after many threats, has officially retired. So we're figuring it out.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us. And then last but not least, Thurston County.
Carolina Mejia. I am a county commissioner and I am the primary elected. Commissioner Ty Menser is our alternate and unfortunately won't be able to join us today. And then I'll pass it over to Jeff.
Yeah, good afternoon, Jeff Gadman, County Treasurer. Actually been on this project with the Funding and Governance Work Group since it started phase 2 in 2017, and I'm the secondary elected.
Is that everybody? I think so. Okay. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. We're going to go over a few history slides, and we've been bringing those to our stakeholders in a lot of the meetings that we've been doing over the last few weeks. We'll spend about 10 minutes there, and then we'll just dive right into it. So let's jump into that presentation. Tessa, were you going to, is someone from Floyd Snyder going to? Amazing. All right.
We should be sharing. Couldn't you see that, Anne?
I think, can everybody see that?
Okay.
Okay, great. So I just want to say, again, we're just really thrilled to, be here with you today. It's been an undertaking, and this is really exciting to be starting this group again. This is a legacy project, and it's important because it's really going to transform our community, and that's why we have so many of our community leaders here today with us. We've been letting folks know that we understand this to be actually the largest estuary restoration of its kind in an urban setting in the United States. That's a really big deal. And I mean, if you really think about how important this is to a community, but also to the state of Washington to really set a good foundation for future work in estuary restorations in urban setting. We're going to just go ahead and get started and go back in time with some really cool historic slides. So historically, freshwater from the Deschutes River would mix with saltwater from Bud Inlet over expansive tidal flats. This area, rich with history, was the southern terminus of the Puget Sound. The Deschutes Estuary project will connect the lower 2 miles of the Coast Salish Sea with its natural ecosystem. Next slide. The Deschutes watershed is approximately 270 square miles. The lower 260 acres of the watershed were significantly disrupted in the 1950s when the state built a dam at the mouth of the Deschutes River. Since that time, there have been chronic violations of water quality standard, and sediment has accumulated up to 13 feet in some areas. There are more than a dozen known invasive species, including the New Zealand mud snails, that caused the water body to be closed to all public use more than a decade ago. The freshwater impoundment is clogged with dense aquatic vegetation because of high nutrient levels. And when these die off, they move into West Bay and decompose. And that process depletes the marine waters of oxygen, which is important for fish and other aquatic life. Next slide. The Deschutes Estuary has a longstanding cultural and spiritual significance with local tribes, in particular, the Squaxin Island tribe, who we have here today. The Squaxin Island tribe considers the people and land of Deschutes Estuary Stechas. They have used the area for time immemorial, and the Deschutes Estuary is of continued importance to them. The tribe holds reserved fishing rights here, though they can no longer touch the water due to the access restrictions. They have been involved in our planning efforts, as many of you know, since the late 1990s, and they're a key partner with us today. Next slide. Yeah, perfect. This area has also been used by Chinese Americans. Chinese immigration to Olympia began in the early 1900s. Chinatown was established along the waterfront of the estuary, and the community built a series of houseboats on the shoreline, which you see in the pictures. This area was referred to as Little Hollywood, and the settlement was ultimately removed as part of the lawn process to construct the dam and Capitol Lake. Next slide. This project, as you all know, has a rich maritime history. The old Olympia Brewing Company operated in Tumwater Historic Park, and those vessels would make their way up 2 miles up the waterway to the brewery and at the base of Tumwater Falls. In 1922, the Port of Olympia was established, and it had its most successful years as part of the timber trade through the 1950s. The water body has always been used recreationally. Olympia Yacht Club was established in its current location in 1912, and the maritime presence has grown increasingly since that time, with additional marinas, an active sailing club, and other boat launches nearby. Next slide. Oh. In modern time, Capitol Lake has been embraced by the community. It's in the heart of our downtown Olympia. There used to be swimming beaches, sailing lessons, and dragon boat races. The trails are also used for daily walking and running, and for me, dog walking. Lake Fair is part of our history, and so are annual marathons and other events. This space is really a place for community and congregation. Next slide. Olympia is also our capital city, and the development of the Capitol campus has significantly influenced the landscape over time. In 1893, the initial visioning began, to design and construct the Capitol building. In 1911, Wilder and White submitted a plan that would perch the Capitol building on the hillside and orient all of the future planning to the views of the water and the mountains. Master planning continues today, though most significant and recent expansion was through the development of Heritage Park, and that happened in the late 1990s. The park was developed to bring people to the shoreline, and as a place to convey more of our state's rich history. Next slide. Heritage Park was designed as an extension of the Capitol campus.
Is it just me, or did Anne's audio cut?
Her audio cut.
Yeah, I can't hear her.
Oh, great.
Oh, you're
now I
back,
can hear.
Anne.
No, it's fine.
Let's have you just restart this one from the top.
It says I'm unstable, so, go figure.
Zoom.
Oh my goodness. Just all kinds of technical things today. Okay, so Heritage Park, I don't know if you heard that, it was an extension of our Capitol campus. And I think folks know the features across the park represent our history from across the state, and they transition that experience from the campus upland, and then it goes into the shared water body. The development of Heritage Park is what finally triggered the state and local jurisdictions to reinitiate efforts to consider alternatives for the long-term management of the water body. And then the tribes compelled the state to convene a planning process to look at management alternatives given the conditions of the water body. And that's what brought us here today. Next slide. Can you guys all still hear me?
Yeah, we can.
You're all captive, quiet audience. I love it. So in 1922, DES identified estuary restoration as the management approach that had the greatest range of benefits, and it was the most supported by our stakeholders, and that's all of you around this table. And so we begin together in this process to re-envision this landscape. Next slide. And as we do this, we must think about all of the rich history of this place, the natural history, the tribal history, the settlement community, maritime community, civic community, as well as the Capitol campus. It is our goal to represent the history in this space and do it in a way that balances our shared interest. And next slide. And what we see when we look at all of this is that the water is a unifying force. All of our history over time has brought us to this place, from harvesting from the water, recreating on the water, crossing the water to either side of Olympia. The water brings us together, and it is the heart of Olympia. It is the prominent view from the Capitol campus that serves all of our Washingtonians, and then restoring the estuary has far-reaching impacts to our state, and it is truly our living legacy. So, okay, that's our presentation we've been using, and I'm going to transition it over to Tessa to give some early project concepts. Tessa, there you go.
Thanks, Anne. I will just say that, in the next slide, we'll go over the schedule. And we've been, as Anne just mentioned, we've been going through this slide deck with all of the stakeholders that we've been meeting with in the last couple of weeks. And what we hear in response to that slide deck is the kind of belief or the support to the range of benefits that we all as a group have always seen. And those benefits are really what compelled us to think about this funding and governance structure. And it's nice to see it in that slide deck and to see it really resonating with the community as we're getting out there at the beginning of this process. And what we always do, of course, is remind folks what estuary restoration means. And so I'm just going to run through that again, because I think we can't do that enough. And we'll talk about how that ties to the governance structure. And that should be a good launch point. And then we can dive into the meeting today. So, as a reminder, the estuary restoration starts with a pretty significant dredge event that'll allow us to reestablish the main channel of the Deschutes Estuary. There's about 500,000, on the order of 500,000 cubic yards of material that would be dredged to get that Deschutes River main channel back in its historic alignment and develop side channels. And what we'll do with that dredged material is we'll place it along the shorelines to create low and high marsh habitat and other varied habitat along the shoreline that can improve ecological diversity and create good visual aesthetics, and also creating that shoreline habitat from those sediments helps us to reduce costs so that we don't have to put all that material into dump trucks and send it upland to a landfill. What we have always assumed is that estuary restoration would be adaptively managed in the future after its construction, likely by a partnership between the state with some support from the Squaxin Island tribe, with that support TBD. And then concurrent to habitat restoration, we'll construct a new Fifth Avenue Bridge just south of the existing alignment. And that new bridge will have a vehicle lane in each direction, separated bike lanes in each direction, and pedestrian lanes with the opportunity for a grade separated pedestrian lane on the south side that really allows for viewing and a slower pace across the estuary. And after that bridge is constructed, it'll be connected to the surface street network, and that will allow us the opportunity to then go in and demolish the existing dam and bridge. Once the Fifth Avenue Bridge is constructed, though, it will become an asset of the City of Olympia per the MOU that we all worked on. And then another big component of the project is restoring recreation to the water body that is right in downtown Olympia and Tumwater. And there are 3 ways that we'll do that. We'll construct a mile of boardwalks along the western shorelines of the middle and the south basins. The South Basin boardwalks, after they are constructed, would be conveyed to the city of Tumwater. We'll also install a new hand-carried boat launch to get people out onto the water, kayaks, stand-up paddle boards. That'll likely be run in coordination with WDFW that will have requirements for decontamination. And then finally, there's the opportunity to restore fishing to the estuary. And one of the really cool things that we've heard from our stakeholder meetings recently is that people are so excited about that opportunity to get to fish on and in the estuary. And so there's good momentum behind that. And that would be an asset that's maintained by DES. So when that's all done, tidal flow is restored. And sediment has the opportunity then to move downstream consistent with its historic sediment processes. And that downstream transport of sediment is what we are all here today, acknowledging though that we are really all here today about the benefits that are realized through restoration of the estuary, but really the key to unlock that and to make it work in an urban environment is to figure out a solution that allows it to be implemented in a way that our downstream uses can also be maintained. And those downstream uses are really recreational use and operational use of the water body by the marinas and the port and other recreationalists. So just a brief overview of our schedule. You all have seen this, but what we want to convey and really highlight are 3 key things that are happening in 2024. The first is that through the first half of 2024, we're focused on conceptual design. And so mid-2024, we'll have conceptual design complete. And halfway through that process, we intended to and just last week, completed a series of targeted stakeholder meetings to receive early input relative to specific design elements so that we can really be influencing our thinking with those that should be helping us to drive the design. So for example, we've been meeting with the City of Olympia on bridge design criteria that they have in their code. The Squaxin Island Tribe has been meeting with us on a monthly basis for restoration design. We've met with the City of Tumwater to understand their interests relative to the boardwalks in the South Basin. WDFW has been with us in some of the restoration and recreation meetings. We've met with a community sounding board that's comprised of about 25 representatives from various interest groups, like, for example, the Olympia Downtown Alliance, Anglers, Parent to Parent, which is a group of parents that have kids with disabilities, so we can ensure that recreation is accessible to all. And so there's a broad range of interests that are represented in that group. And then also we're meeting with adjacent property owners, so those that have direct access to the water or direct views of the water that would change as a result of the process, have the ability to be with us in coordination at the very front end. So that's what we're just finishing up those stakeholder meetings, and we'll continue through mid-2024 with conceptual design. And then the end of 2024, we focus our efforts on 30% design and do that same thing again. We're about halfway through. We meet with the targeted stakeholder groups to seek their input on specific design elements. Also in 30%, we'll have an opportunity for a broader public meeting and broader public engagement depending on our funding scenario. Sarah has been leading our work to pursue state and federal grant funding. And if we are successful with that, and hopefully we have the opportunity to really broaden our outreach and also to broaden our outreach and compress our timeline. So that's the second thing for 2024. And then the third thing for 2024 is that we're doing this work together with the goal to be completed with the ILA at the end of this year. And that also includes coordination with the port and the marinas about sediment deposition downstream and also sediment control. That was the quick summary of where we're at this year. Any questions on that at a broader sense for the project? Okay, great. So let's see. And after that, we were going to transition into the conversation about how we work together this year. Shall we head in that direction? Okay. All right. So I'm going to share my screen again. And let's see here. Are folks seeing this new process map? Okay, I see thumbs up. All right, so let us orient you to what you're seeing here. This is a new document and we can send it out at the end of this meeting and post it online too, of course. It is more linear than the process maps that we have presented to you in the past, and maybe that's a really beautiful thing. And what you'll see working from left to right in the, actually, let me just start with the timeline. So you can see that this is the entire focus of this process map is 2024, because our goal is to have the interlocal agreement executed by the end of the year. What you'll also see is that we would like to continue with the format of alternating between group meetings and individual meetings. So the individual meetings are shown in this more teal blue, and the group meetings are shown in the darker shade of blue. We thought that that was so helpful last time to be able to come together as a group and talk about content and new content together, but then have an opportunity to meet with each of you individually to hear your reactions to that and to help us consider as we develop and transition the ILA. So we're proposing that. We are also proposing three different review cycles, or potentially 4 different review cycles of the interlocal agreement. So I'm going to focus here on what we're seeing in the first quarter, now getting into the second quarter of the year. That Anne on Friday sent the draft interlocal agreement to this group. And today we would like to introduce you to that and talk about really the couple key things that are the new content for us to discuss since the MOU. You'll also see that it is very similar to the MOU that we all worked on together in 2022. We think that it would be very valuable for this group to complete a review cycle, so have a technical review cycle before it's advanced further into each organization. The concept is that we were, or most of us were together in the past MOU, and it would be good to kind of refresh our thinking, see if there's new thinking that should be considered, have an opportunity to work through some kind of finer details, get reactions from you all, do the standard thing before we distribute it widely. So there's an opportunity for us to get your feedback, make modifications, and then by the time that we meet next time, have that cleaned up and revised so that it then advances to legal review. Having a legal review cycle, building off of the technical review, will be our review number 2. And then we have a final review opportunity at the end of the year that, all the technical folks and the legal folks can all make sure that what we have decided has been represented to your satisfaction in the interlocal agreement. You'll see that we're running this on a bi-monthly schedule. So we anticipate that every other month there will be an updated interlocal agreement that will be sent out to the group. And at the end of the year, that it allows for time for briefings to your boards and commissions. We heard from all of you when we were meeting earlier in the year that having that opportunity to get in front of the board, give them time to take a look at it, give them time to vote or take action on it was really important and could be best timed for that October window ahead of the end of the year schedule push for most entities. So we're holding October, November-ish for those briefings and the signature processes that would allow us to then have a final executed document in December. Let me pause there on that, and then I will come back and introduce a suggestion for a recurring meeting series, and then also describe to you what's happening at the bottom relative to coordination with the marinas. But any questions about the 3 review cycles, the bi-monthly meeting occurrence, the individual meetings, or the goals, the schedule goals that you're seeing toward the end of the year? We'd love to make sure this works for the whole group.
Yeah, and does that work with your decision processes? And if it doesn't, then we can make some alterations too.
I see Jay and then Danny.
The only thing I'm just seeing as I look at the the October, November timeframe to get briefings, to get signatures. I just know how long it takes to get things through all the jurisdictions for signature and the timing of that. It's also, we get into the holiday season as you get into November, and then most of us are done by mid-December with council meetings. So just, I'm not suggesting you need to change it, but just keep that in consideration that it's a pretty compressed schedule once you get into November.
Got it. Okay, so Jay, are you thinking that kind of the 6 weeks that we might have from the beginning of October to the mid-November, we should try to create more time there if we can by pressing the front end of the schedule?
Yeah, I just don't know that you're really going to have 6 weeks there. I think when you factor in holidays and it's also right in the middle of everyone's budget calendars and budget updates. So if we can find more time and to speed that up into September, it might be worthwhile.
Okay. Okay.
Danny?
Good.
Yeah, I was gonna say something pretty similar, but I'll also add that we're planning on doing a lot of review of our comprehensive plan update later in the year too. So just at least you know, in Olympia, while we're working on our budget for the next year, we're also going to be diving into our comp plan update. And so we'll just we'll need as much notice as possible as to when this will come in front of the city council. But there's a lot of competing priorities in that time frame.
Okay. So what our goal then is to try to get the final draft out to the group in September is what I'm hearing from the city of Olympia, and I'm seeing a lot of heads nodding around the table. Okay. All right, so we'll figure out how we can do that on our side with the schedule. Other feedback on things that we need to be considering at the end of the process or during? Okay. Is everyone up for a technical review of the ILA first? So a careful review by this group before sending more widely so we can work out some of the kinks together unless it's perfect. Okay, cool. All right, that sounds great. We'll send a follow-up with our hope for when that review is completed. All right, so we think that a bi-monthly is really helpful so that we can meet and then have opportunity to meet with you all in the month off and get those revisions into the ILA. So what we'd like to propose is every other month on the third Monday from 1 to 3, which is basically what we're doing today. And we just thought it worked for everybody. We could try to make that work on calendars through the rest of the year and send out an invite after this meeting or because we need to keep this schedule here if we're going to reach our end of year target. So that would, that's something that we can follow up with, but, and folks can say yay or nay to after the meeting, but we're going to go ahead and propose that. So our next meeting would be in May, the third Monday of May, for example. Okay. It's going to be a lot easier if we get them on calendars through the end of the year. Perfect. Okay. Then what we're thinking is a week or two after we meet as a group, we would also institute a standing meeting with each entity in the individual format. So if we're meeting on the third Monday every month, it could be that the first week of the following month, we have an individual standing with each of you. So we can, you have, 2 weeks between the group meeting and our individual meetings with you to kind of have reviewed, done some coordination internally and be prepped for a focused conversation. So we'll also send those requests out. And let me ask here, anybody object to scheduling those out through the end of the year? I'm gonna think the answer is no. Okay.
Yeah, it'll make it easier.
Yeah, it's gonna make it a lot easier. We can thank City of Olympia for that recommendation. Okay, great. So we'll get that coordination going after the meeting today. So let me then draw our attention back to the schedule here. And a very important component of the work that we're doing is coordination with the marinas, as we would assume. And so we had a first meeting with the marinas in, I think it was January or February, earlier in the year to work with them about, understand from them the sediment deposition that's currently happening at their marina, and then also to solicit their input on potential sediment control measures that could be evaluated as we move into our technical analysis in the design phase. So we received some thoughts from them around what we could take a closer look at. For example, you know, is a breakwater effective? Is dredging a deeper channel effective? And so we're moving that sediment control analysis forward now. That's important for them, of course, because they want to have as little sediment as possible depositing in their marinas. And it's important for us because if we can reduce the amount of sediment depositing at the marinas, we're reducing our overall lift for this group for the dredging responsibilities. So we anticipate coordinating with the marinas throughout the year, and we will keep them updated on what we're doing here in this process, and then vice versa. Anything that, you know, the content that we hear from them, we'll bring that back to this group to report out as well. They remain very interested in how we're progressing, but we have always felt that having separate agreements is very important. So the ILA would stay with this group, and then the state would execute separate agreements with each of the marinas, because the difference in how this is played out across public entities and then private business operations. Let me ask my team if there's anything else we'd add here on the schedule and process, and then I also see Jay's hand up. And Jeff.
Let's go to questions and.
Okay, Jay and then Jeff.
Thanks, Tessa. So I'm just looking at this July opportunity to modify sediment management costs if appropriate. And so I just want to be careful around that, because we spent a lot of time in the MOU to get that sorted out. And so I'm hoping this isn't, hey, let's start all over again. I'm just trying to figure out what triggers this opportunity to modify, or what might get us into that conversation, because I feel like we spent a lot of time on that already. That makes sense?
Yeah, totally. Great question. Let me clarify first, and then I'm going to get to your answer there, that the allocation for each entity would not change. So each entity has a split allocation with an additional to the City of Olympia. We anticipate if the costs change, that is one thing, but the allocation, the percentage of the total cost that is taken by the entity would not be renegotiated. What we're saying here is if the sediment control analysis shows that, for example, there's a significant reduction in deposition at the marinas that would then therefore significantly reduce the dredging responsibilities, that we could look at that together as a group and make a decision on that. We want to be really transparent that we're doing that analysis right now. However, I think that there's a lot of strength in, as you said, Jay, maintaining the total costs that we have put out, because every, you know, that represents a reasonable worst case, and every entity has suggested that that is an amount that could work for them. Again, that's on the order of $120,000 to $180,000 a year once the payments start. So the purpose here is to say that there could potentially be the opportunity based on the results of that analysis, but we would make that decision together as a team.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Jeff?
Oh.
Yeah, thank you. So one of the things that I'm reminded of as we're discussing this, when we were coming up with the MOU, we had talked about, going through the ILA process and what that was going to involve. And we had actually discussed a separate agreement for each entity, with the thought being that, to put the agreement with every entity into one document was going to create a document that would be very cumbersome and difficult to manage. So are you thinking just one ILA for the group and then still having the separate agreements, or what's your thought process there?
Dave, do you want to start, or would you like me to?
I can start. I think The way I would think about it is there is a base agreement for everybody and then subsidiary agreements as needed. Easiest example would be the transfer of assets. There are some details that I haven't even thought of. I don't think anybody has thought of what's going to be necessary when you transfer the Fifth Avenue Bridge. There will be lots of details regarding utilities, easements, that sort of thing that have to be addressed. And that doesn't need to be in a base agreement. That would be in a subsidiary agreement. But as far as, hey, how do we deal with this estuary and the sediment on a communal basis? I think at least my vision has been that is part of the base agreement. So Jeff, does that answer the question?
Yeah, that's the way I remember our conversations. I just wanted to make sure we're all still thinking the same thing, or that I'm still thinking like you are.
Yeah, and one agreement that I think is, I'll talk about it a bit more, is once you get into finance, that usually requires a ton of detail. So there might be like an addendum that it almost has a life of its own, but we have some decisions to make before we even get there.
Great question, Jeff. Other questions or thoughts? Should we go?
Okay. Great. Well, Anne, I think we took 3 key action items from this. One, we'll send this map to the group so they all have it after we've considered how we can open up more time in September for board briefing. So we'll make that revision. And then we'll get on the calendar the bi-monthly meeting series of this group and then individual meetings series that follow a couple weeks after.
Excellent.
Okay.
I think we're passing it off to you, Dave, to walk us through an initial review of our draft ILA.
Okay, do you think we should share or just kind of have a talk through at this point of the document? People want it up. I'm not going to be reading through it particularly, and happy to do it either way. Why don't I? There we go. I'll share.
Okay.
You can all look at it. It's pretty. You know, I worked on it, so I might as well show the work I've done. What the heck?
Beautiful thing, Dave.
Yeah. So everybody's gotten a copy of the ILA at this point, and in many ways, I know you're going to want to, you know, pull it apart and read through it and see how it applies to you and how it applies to the whole. But I did want to kind of talk about some concepts and then a couple of changes, and they're not really changes of concepts. It's just that MOUs deal with one thing and ILAs deal with another, and you have to move from one to the other. And so that's, you know, one's a vision and one is actually talking about how we're going to make this vision occur. And so those are really the changes we'll talk about. Some concepts, some general ideas is as we move from the MOU to the ILA, we wanted to keep the concepts and the organization basically the same. To build off what Jay said earlier, we've done some heavy lifting. We've made some hard decisions, had some difficult talks, and we don't want to lose those. We don't want to kind of revisit something we don't have to revisit necessarily. So we wanted to preserve the heavy lifting we've already done. Personal preference is I wanted to make it to the extent possible chronological, so you could read through the document and get a picture of what's going to happen, and if not chronological, at least somewhat logical. And hopefully that's the document tells a story. And kind of an almost an above and beyond, we wanted this to tell a story, to be a vision. This is not usually the legal department's strong suit, but we wanted to have a robust introduction, background, really answer the why of what we're doing. What is our shared vision? Because this is, as Ann said earlier, a legacy project, and people will look at the ILA and it should tell a story in itself. You know, people say that budgets actually tell story, but also this, you know, this will tell a story in and of itself. So those are probably the base concepts I wanted to cover. Moving into the ILA, we wanted to, an organizing principle we all just realized along the MOU process is we want to keep this as simple as possible. At one point, we talked about having committees or another entity, but then the realization that, hey, the estuary will just become an estuary. and let's treat it as such. And the big issue is going to be, what's going to happen with the sediment. The specific assets, we don't have to have a committee to deal with those. Those can go to the entities that make sense to look after them. So the ILA preserves that general walking through of what's going to happen and how it's going to happen. Let's just kind of plop and go through it right now. So there's the introduction, the background, as I discussed, how the estuary alternative was picked. I've mentioned this to some of you. I'm an Olympia native. I went to elementary, middle school, and high school, and I am old enough that I remember when the swimming platform was there. It wasn't in use, but it still existed. And so I know that these discussions have been going on for 40, 50 years. So how the project has evolved, the issue has evolved, and some of the concepts that went into the MOU. And then we get to the agreement. Once again, talk about what are concepts that we want to put into play. And the concepts have the elements of the state will do the initial planning and pay for it. The state put in the dam, so the state is doing the lifting of the actual construction of removing that sort of thing. Then the specific assets get transferred. And last is the sediment management. Just going to go through the next few sections pretty quickly. I'll get to where I can do it page by page. There we go. Some of the just administrative parts of any contract. Who are the parties? Who's the project manager? Again, this will be an estuary. So the idea is that DNR will, with DES doing its part as far as it relates to the campus, would probably be the project manager moving forward. The party representatives, the term of the agreement, some basic admin stuff. The withdrawal and renegotiation, we talked about this in the MOU, so really no change. There's a little subcategory of things that might happen that might cause us to look at, hey, do we need to change some scoping issues? The first category, this 4.1 is, can't remember the name of that movie, but extinction level events. Those would put the entire project at risk. The next level is, hey, it's going to modify the project. And then withdrawal for convenience basically says, as long as you've paid all your bills to the end of this term, you can withdraw. Not sure that would make sense for anybody, but it's there. Okay. Then moving to really the heart of this is you get into section 8, sediment management, funding, and governance. And we, once again, I actually at one point is like, how do we make decisions? There's two big issues, money and decisions. And the decision making was a real problem. It's like, how do you avoid having a committee, another entity? And so we basically, how I settled on that was, you do have a project manager, not the team settled on that, is that you do have a project manager, the one who's going to be monitoring the bathymetric surveys, the one who's going to be keeping track of all the records. And so it would make sense for them to put together an initial cut of here's what's going to happen. The biggest single decision is it time to dredge? And this is section 8.6. I'll bounce back. I'm bouncing a little out of order. My apologies for that. But section 8.6 is where that decision happens. Point 1 is the project manager collects the data. And here's something that Tessa was really kind of pushed for and was really instrumental, others as well, is we need that project manager to have some flexibility. And I'll use the example of the marinas, the ones who are primarily affected. As they're monitoring the data, you might be able to do some things that will push off a dredge. Maybe it's only collecting it, the sediment is only collecting in one place. Can we do some active management? Maybe it doesn't need to move some boats around, so that can push some things around, and that would be far cheaper. Maybe as you're doing one dredge, you actually should do a pre-dredge of somewhere else, so it'll put off the next one. Give some flexibility up front to the project manager. So that's the monitoring and the consultation and then make a preliminary decision. Hey, here's our plan. Can't put it off any longer. Here's what the dredge is going to look like, and put that out to the group. Will take a look at it, provide feedback, and then ultimately it will be DNR or the project manager who would make the decision. Okay, I've looked at it. We're going to go forward. One of the limitations you'll see in reading through this is there are allowable reasons for objecting to a dredge event. We wanted to, again, avoid having an arm wrestling contest at every dredge event. We've done heavy lifting. Tessa's team and others are putting together these triggers. They're established triggers. If your scientists don't think that those triggers have been met, okay, let's talk about it. If we think that there should be more adaptive management and maybe a little bit of pushing and nudging there, let's talk about it. But we don't want to revisit the basic idea of, hey, there's dredge events coming. This is when we do it, and we've met it. So then there's basically an appeal process where you go to the dispute resolution. So that is the decision-making process that we came up with. Would happy to talk to people about tweaks and modifications to that, where your entities play a role in that decision-making process. Because that's it's a tightrope to walk there. The balance between actually having the decisions being made, not having a full other entity, but having participation in meaningful, back and forth. So that is it's a three-way tightrope, if such a thing were to exist. So then after the dredge events, you would have a report. There we go at top, and you look to the future. I'm going to go back. That's the first decision, or the first big issue. The second one is money. The cost allocation is preferred not to be revisited, but we still have the amounts and who's going to collect them. One of the biggest issues raised under the MOU, not who's going to hold them, excuse me, under the MOU, was the worry about sweeping. And that was particularly a worry when it came to state entities, because the reality of the project manager and the day-to-day involvement would lead one toward a state involvement in that. Ironically, and when you really think about it, sweeping is an issue that could impact any of our municipalities, because the whole concept is that a current legislative decision-making body can't bind a future one. And that applies to all of us who have legislative decision-making bodies. I understand there's a fear more that in reality, the state has shown that to happen more often. Anne is working a lot of that issue, and I'm working with her. Have made some significant progress, but that is going to be continued to be developed. Some of you, we've talked to you individually about floating ideas, exploring ideas. We tend to keep coming back to the idea that a state entity looks to be the best solution. But again, that's an area that is something that's going to be developed over the next bit of time. I think that those are the main things I wanted to cover. I will say that as a personal preference of mine on the dispute resolution, I don't know if any of you have come upon this issue, is where you have a locked-in dispute resolution where you wish you could just talk to each other and figure out the best way to, what's the best forum to decide this in right now, but instead you're locked into some AAA arbitration or something else, and you all get stuck. So that's why I put some flexibility into even deciding how the dispute gets settled. With a fallback, if you can't figure it out, there is a fallback position on that. So that is primarily what I wanted to introduce as probably the two biggest issues that are changed or fleshed out from the MOU. I think the biggest one is that's actually now has real bones to it, is the decision making. The finance has some additional thinking that's gone into it, but it is still a work in progress. Anne and Tessa, and Sarah, what did I miss that should be covered in this? And anybody, actually.
I'll just add to that. I'm working closely with Dave, and we're bringing in some of our OFM partners on the fiduciary responsibility. So more to come with that, but there's a lot of research we need to do to find ways to prevent unintentional sweeping. So Tessa, Sarah, Lorelei, anything?
I thought that was a good overview. Nothing to add.
Thanks, Dave. Any questions from the group? Jasmine.
Just on things like that where there may be technical refinements, right? Like how do you flag that we've come to impasse? Is there sort of a need to have a trigger? Who's going to be working? Is that us or and when and who?
Well, on some of those, like the easiest one would be the dredge event, because that's probably the one that's fleshed out the most. You had that 45 days and say the Port of Olympia says, hey, we look at the data and we come to a very different conclusion than you. We don't think there should be a dredge event yet. That's just, your basic dispute, and DNR, the project manager, looks at it and says, no, we disagree. We think it has to happen. Then either side could declare in my view, and maybe this does need to be more fleshed out, could declare an impasse and ask for then you'd talk about, hey, what's the best way to decide this? We can't even figure that out. Then you go to that arbitration that's listed in there. And in that scenario, it would be the port who would have been the one who, raised their hand and said, I object. So I guess we can put a formal, not only I object, but I ask for arbitration would be a two-step, process. So I can add that detail in there. Thanks.
Danny.
What level of feedback are you asking from us at this moment?
We don't want to get into too much into the weeds, but if there's some conceptual issues, I'd be happy to kind of jot them down. I don't know that I'll have an answer for anything right now, but actually, why don't we just see if everybody's hand pops up, then maybe we'll revisit it. But if we've got some just specific things, fire away and we can always write them down.
Okay, well, I'll identify like one specific thing. I'm thinking of like the bridge design for Fifth Avenue and just clarifying within the ILA, that Olympia's engineering design and development standards will be used in that design.
Mm.
And Danny, we're working closely with the city of Olympia on a lot of that right now too. But
yeah, I know you are. Thank you.
Yeah. Hey, Jeff.
Jeff, yeah.
So with regard to the dispute resolution and the arbitration, stuff like that. So I could see, like you said, I could see where, the project manager says, hey, it's time to go. And one of the parties in the agreement says, are you sure? For whatever reason, right? I'm not convinced that an arbitration clause is necessary here, because I could see it if it was project manager says, okay, it's time to dredge, so now you all have to pony up your share, right? The money's already been allocated and it's locked away somewhere. So I don't know. I mean, the dispute, I think, might be more, oh, we don't want you to go now because you're going to disturb this site over here or something like that. It's certainly not going to be financial.
I think we do have flexibility to avoid arbitration. I did want to have something kind of as a backstop of good grief. We can't even agree on the shape of the table. Where do we go from here?
Right.
So Dave, I think, sorry, I was just going to add a quick follow-up thing. I think, Dave, you're saying that the agreement does allow for latitude in kind of technical conversations between the entities in response to their review of the data. It doesn't, and I think that's what Jeff was getting at. Like, can we have a conversation, and do we need to define that is a step before we go into the formal process?
I think it's there. 9.3, the first part says any disputes under this agreement shall be resolved by negotiation if possible.
Oh, okay, got it.
So it does invite, I think I can, because there might be a different type of dispute, because you're right, it's not going to be money out of my pocket, money out of your pocket sort of dispute. It's, have those triggers been met? But then that's kind of where the flexibility is saying, hey, that's a highly technical question. Can we agree on, Janet scientists from UW to review this and tell us whether in her opinion it's been met? If we could, I wanted to build in flexibility for resolving something that might be highly technical and not really kind of like a traditional arbitrators, everybody get together on one day and give me a binder and I'm going to give you a decision 2 weeks later. Those are different, those might be different beasts.
And Matt, and then I
think
have Jasmine too.
I'm sorry, that's a really good point, Dave. And you're right. It's, you don't want an elected official, although most of us are very, very reasonable people, but you don't want an elected official objecting without some sort of science behind their objection, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and that was the sideboards that were, as the team, asking me to draft it up that way, honestly, putting the sideboards, because we're all going to be subject, not we, you all, I'm an attorney, you all are going to be subject to political pressures in the future. And who knows where that'll take us and what it'll look like.
Right.
Does it also, Dave, in reverse, does it work that if the project manager is not moving fast enough, or the parties, as opposed to the opposite way, what you explained?
At least in my mind, I'll reread it to make sure, because I absolutely thought of that idea. What if, one of the very downstream folks, like the port or lot, you guys are quite a ways downstream, basically says, hey, those triggers have been met. Why aren't you guys doing something? I view that as another, at least again, I view that, and if you read it and say, no, Dave, I don't think you got it, we can make that even more clear, because I view that either side of that is a perfectly legitimate dispute.
Thank you.
That's what I was gonna. Oh, may I? I think you called my name.
Yeah, go ahead, Jasmine.
As a more like, I could see a scenario where marinas are concerned, the port feels like the sediment is already starting to impact operations, and whereas a group we're saying, oh, we're referring to that to the scientists. Oh, they're still working on it. The scientists are still figuring it out.
Mm-hmm.
Where then one entity is saying, well, we're at impasse because this is a problem and isn't being addressed. And the group is saying, we're not at impasse. Like, we're in the process of figuring it out. So that's the piece, I think, David, I would commend to you to sort of think through that scenario.
Kind of how to compel action, how to basically, you don't need a majority vote to have an impasse. You don't even need two necessarily.
Right, you just need one to.
Yeah. Okay.
Sarah, I see that you're going to add something, and then I'll. Nope.
Nope. It's all,
okay.
This is all. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to suggest that in the next iteration of the agreement, one thing that we want to flesh out better is what are those criteria, and really define very carefully what is the criteria that needs to be met to trigger a dredge event, because obviously we need to have good definition around that, because we're all going to be looking at the bathymetric surveys relative to that, but also and that makes it very clear relative to, are we there yet? Can we use adaptive management measures to avoid reaching that trigger? And so we're working on that, and we'll put that in as a new table in the next version.
In an ideal world, I was going to say, this is sort of to put it on autopilot isn't quite right, but to have the document so clearly articulate what triggers and what does not trigger when you get the results of that bathymetric survey every year, that this is a clear yes or no, but there is always the potential for ambiguity within that we don't anticipate. So that's why that criteria, the better we define that now, the more autopilot this will be in the future.
Yeah. And I guess one thing that I would add is that, this project is so complex, but one of the beauties here is that the data, or the science that we'll be processing to identify whether a dredge event is triggered is relatively simple. It's a bathymetric survey that shows us how much depth is provided at the slips or at the port, and our marina users able to get into their slips. And so that there is the ability for that to be processed very quickly after the bathymetric survey is completed and sent out to the group every year.
And just to make sure, I think everyone is on the same page, but just to make sure we all understand, since some of you are newer to the process, the criteria that are in there now are those that were used in the EIS. So those were fleshed out quite well during that process.
Yeah, and they were used in the EIS and they were sourced from conversations with the port and the marinas. So we didn't just arbitrarily say this is what a significant impact is to you. We heard from those entities what a significant impact is, and we decided to let the dredge event be triggered by when we're approaching that.
And my view is that there is more likely to be gray area on the adaptive management. Yeah, the trigger's been met, but what have you done? Have you done enough to push things back, or or you're doing adaptive management where it really isn't working for my entity? We need the dredge. Those type of disputes, as opposed to just what does the math say?
And we wanted to put out to this group, we don't anticipate that anybody would not like us to explore adaptive management, but of course, please wave your hand in objection if that is the case. But the logic behind the adaptive management is if there's something reasonable that we can be doing to lower our costs or increase the frequency between the dredging events. And so we really think that that is best negotiated, as I said earlier, with the entities that would be impacted. So we don't see defining those measures within this group. It's really compelling the project manager to say, oh, Olympia Yacht Club, can we shuffle things around, or we'll figure out what that looks like with them. But that is something that we would like to advance in our conversations with the marinas this year and in the coming years.
We would never want to get into a situation of rigidity where the agreement requires a certain thing to happen when it doesn't make sense because the entities who are operating their businesses have something else going on, or, you can imagine all kinds of scenarios. So that adaptive management addresses that as well.
Jeff.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on that. I think the adaptive management is actually the wisest way to go here, because this is a long-term agreement. And technology and methods are going to evolve over time. And if we have to come back in and negotiate with each other again, just to, recognize another method, that's just going to be cumbersome and ridiculous. I hate bureaucracy.
Says the bureaucrat. Any other questions, comments? Folks are feeling pretty good with this approach. That's great.
Well, I was just going to suggest that, Dave, there are a couple other things that we were going to fill in with additional detail in the next iteration, in addition to fleshing out the significance criteria. Did you want to just give a quick overview of what we're tracking for that? Or I can as well.
Why don't you, since you,
Okay.
I'm not picking up that baton as smoothly as I should.
No problem. This is all of our thinking. But so, we need to be figuring out the approach for inflation, annual inflation. And so that's something that we're tracking. And we just want to let you guys know that that's more work for this group, and we haven't forgotten about that. And then, of course, as part of the fiduciary responsibility, thinking about the investment opportunities and constraints. And so we'll be able to report back on that as those conversations unfold. So I would say those two plus the significance criteria table are the three that we're drilling down into in the next round.
Well, we can keep moving then.
Okay.
Did you want to recap what we have, or was there anything else, Tessa, you guys wanted to cover?
We don't have anything else on the agenda.
This is great.
Yeah. Wow, how efficient we are.
Yeah.
Not too bad the weather is so bad, might be able to.
I say we all go for a walk for the next 45 minutes, but so it sounds like we're getting some calendar dates together and going to be reaching out to get some one-on-ones. Were there other things, Tessa, we were going to follow up with?
No, I think that sounds great. We'll send an email with the calendar requests and if we could we'd like to target meeting individually the first or second week in April. I think it's likely the second week at this point, although I know that's spring break for some folks. So we'll be flexible with the April meeting cycle. And the goal would be to have completed the technical reviews of the ILA before those individual meetings. So that's about 2 to 3 weeks with the ILA, and our hope is really that you can sit with it and do a fully detailed review. That in an email.
Great. Well, I guess with that, we can end a little early so folks can enjoy their afternoon. I just want to thank everybody for coming back and reconvening. It's just super excited to where we're at, and it feels like we've got good concurrence to where we're going. And I think folks know we're going after grants and different partnerships with the city, with the port, and just looking for opportunities because of all the overlap we have with our different priorities. But I think regionally, this is such an important project. What we're all working on with sea level rise, with the remediation, these are legacy projects with interconnectivity, and it's great to be a part of this partnership with all of you. So thank you for investing your time and energy and your leadership in these discussions. And we'll see you, I guess, in a couple months. Well, sooner because the individual ones, but yeah, just thanks all for joining us today, and have a good rest of your Monday.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.